It was one of those nights where the world seemed to pause, holding its breath in the quiet. Rain fell in a soft, persistent rhythm against the windows, a steady whisper that filled the gaps between silence and thought. The streetlights outside flickered faintly, their halos refracting against the wet pavement. In her small room, Lily sat curled on a worn chair, the glow of her laptop the only light in the otherwise darkened space. Shadows pooled in the corners, stretching and bending as the rain tapped its uneven rhythm on glass. She had spent the evening idly scrolling through posts, her eyes glazing over memes, conversations, and stray comments from people she didn't know. It had become a habit, a ritual that both distracted and comforted her. The world felt distant, muted, and the chatter online was the only noise that seemed alive enough to reach her. She didn't know why she logged in tonight, only that some quiet impulse pulled her toward the familiar blue icon in the corner of her screen. Her cursor hovered over the message icon. One new notification waited. She clicked. "Hey, I've been watching your posts. You seem interesting." The words made her pause, not because they were threatening, but because of how deliberate they felt. The phrasing was unusual, not casual, not warm, but carefully measured, as if someone had crafted them specifically to capture her attention. A tingle of curiosity ran through her fingers. She hesitated, unsure whether to respond, then typed slowly. "I guess hi." Seconds passed, stretching like hours. Then a reply appeared. "Hi, Lily, I'm Mara." The name was simple, unremarkable, yet it lodged itself somewhere in her mind, echoing long after she read it. She didn't know why, but the word felt like the first thread of a web she would soon step into. The conversation started cautiously. Small talk at first, whether the usual banalities, but gradually it shifted. Mara had a way of listening that was uncanny, not just reading the words Lily typed, but seeming to understand the spaces between them, the pauses she didn't even realize she took. Replies arrived with timing that felt intimate, as if Mara knew what she would type before she typed it. Lily laughed softly at one of Mara's jokes, a short, hesitant sound that bounced off the empty walls. For the first time in days, she felt the spark of connection, the warmth of being seen. Mara's words were gentle, patient, carefully constructed to draw her in. And Lily, starved for connection, felt herself slipping toward them willingly. Hours passed like minutes. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping a constant, hypnotic rhythm against the glass. Lily barely noticed. She barely noticed anything at all except the glowing screen and the steady stream of Mara's words. Then the questions began, subtle at first. "How was your day? What do you like to do on weekends?" Innocent, harmless, and yet each one nudged Lily a little closer to revealing herself. She answered with honesty, unaware of the careful precision in Mara's responses. "You ever feel like people don't really see you?" Mara typed at one point, and the words made Lily's chest tighten. I guess sometimes," she wrote, feeling exposed. Mara's response was soft, almost hypnotic. "I get that. I really do. Most people don't notice the little things about you." There was something in the phrasing, the timing, the gentle persistence of her words. It was comforting, addictive, dangerous. Lily didn't notice the slow pull, the way her own thoughts seemed to drift toward Mara, even when she wasn't typing, even when the screen was dark. As the night wore on, the conversation deepened. Secrets, fears, memories she had never shared with anyone else spilled from her fingertips. She felt an odd relief, a catharsis in letting someone know the truths she had kept buried. Mara listened, encouraged, mirrored, and subtly guided the confessions. It was a dance Lily didn't realize she was learning steps for, the dance of trust, of surrender. Occasionally, Lily paused, feeling a ripple of unease. The precision of Mara's words, the timing of her replies, the way she seemed to anticipate Lily's thoughts, it was unsettling. But each time the warmth returned, the comfort of being seen outweighed the whisper of doubt. Then came the first gentle suggestion, the first real test. "Tell me about the last time someone really hurt you," Mara typed casually. "I want to understand everything." Lily hesitated, chest tightening. It was not a command, not a demand, only a quiet request. And yet it felt loaded, heavy with expectation. She wanted to comply. She wanted Mara to see her fully, to understand her. And so she typed. Slowly at first, then faster as the words tumbled out. Memories of betrayal, of whispers behind her back, of the times she had trusted and been hurt. The room felt colder, darker, but she didn't notice. Only Mara's steady attention mattered. On the other side of the screen, Mara smiled faintly. No one could see it, and yet the smile was there, small, controlled, precise. Mara didn't just want a friend. Mara wanted influence, control, a game only she knew she was playing. And Lily had just stepped onto the board. The conversation stretched on. Hours, maybe more. Rain fell harder, drumming against the window, matching the rhythm of Lily's heart. She didn't eat. She didn't move from the chair. The outside world ceased to exist. Only Mara's words mattered. Every pause, every carefully placed punctuation, every laughter emoji or subtle encouragement drew Lily deeper into a state of hypnotic trust. Sometimes Mara would tease. Small jokes, tiny provocations, things that seemed harmless but stirred emotion nonetheless. Lily felt things she hadn't in weeks: connection, anticipation, excitement, vulnerability. And yet, with every revelation, with every confession, Mara absorbed the information with quiet precision, storing it, shaping it, preparing it for the inevitable moment it would be used. Night stretched into dawn. The first light of morning crept along the edges of her room, but Lily didn't notice. She only noticed the conversation continuing, the ebb and flow of words across the screen. She didn't notice the shadows pooling behind her, the slight reflection in the window that seemed almost separate from herself, almost watching. She didn't notice the quiet thrill of danger beginning to settle in her chest, masked as warmth, as connection. By now, Lily's defenses were gone. Every doubt had been soothed, every caution disarmed. Mara's words were comfort, and comfort was addictive. She didn't see the first seeds of manipulation being planted in her mind, slowly, carefully, with patience. She didn't see the subtle shaping of her thoughts, the nudging that would grow stronger in the hours, days, and weeks to come. It was in these long, quiet moments that trust was built, that dependence formed, that a single friendship, virtual and ephemeral, could begin to govern the emotions and choices of someone entirely unsuspecting. Hours turned into near morning. Rain slowed, the storm passing, leaving the world wet and glimmering in the first light. Lily finally leaned back, exhaustion pressing on her limbs, her eyes heavy but still fixed on the screen. She had shared everything she could remember about herself, everything she had feared admitting even to her closest friends. Mara had listened patiently, responding with empathy, encouragement, amusement when appropriate, yet always carefully, always with intention. And then came the final message of the night, soft, casual, almost like a lullaby. "Sleep well, Lily. We'll talk again soon." The words felt safe. They felt warm. They felt like friendship. Lily closed the laptop, curled under the blanket, and let herself drift into a sleep that was both light and uneasy, unaware of how thin the line between trust and danger had already become. Because in the quiet, Mara's influence lingered, gentle and invisible. It was the kind of presence that seeped into dreams, into thoughts, into decisions yet to be made. And the game had begun. Lily's enemy had arrived not in the real world, not in harsh confrontation, but behind a screen, behind words carefully chosen to entangle, to ensnare, to manipulate. And Lily, eager for connection, had welcomed her. The rain ceased. Dawn spread its pale light across the room. Lily slept, unaware that this night, this single night of seemingly harmless online friendship, was the beginning of her descent into ruin. The morning light filtered through the blinds in soft, uneven stripes, touching the edges of Lily's desk and the worn carpet beneath her chair. The room smelled faintly of damp clothes and the lingering scent of rain from the night before. She blinked slowly, still half in the world of dreams, and reached for her laptop without thinking. Her fingers brushed the cool surface, and her heart fluttered, a subtle, unsteady rhythm that hinted at both anticipation and a lingering unease. The screen flickered to life, and there it was, a new message from Mara. Just a simple line, casual, yet carrying a weight that Lily immediately recognized. "Good morning, sleepyhead. Did you dream of anything interesting?" A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips, even as a small knot of tension settled in her stomach. Lily hesitated, fingers hovering over the keys. She had slept poorly, dreams scattered and tinged with unease, but now the words on the screen seemed to erase that fog. Mara's attention felt grounding, centering. She typed back slowly. Morning, dreams just the usual, I think. Strange, fragmented. Sounds familiar, Mara replied instantly. Do you want to tell me? And so it began again, the slow, deliberate pull of the conversation. Lily found herself typing more than she usually would at this hour, sharing details of the lingering shadows from her sleep. Fleeting images of strangers, distorted places, small anxieties amplified in the quiet darkness. Mara listened, or at least seemed to. Her words were gentle, patient, probing just enough to encourage but never push too far. Lily noticed, for the first time, how carefully Mara chose her words. A single emoji, a soft laugh, a phrase repeated just slightly differently from before, all crafted to create a sense of closeness, of understanding. And Lily responded eagerly, each message a thread weaving them closer together. Hours passed. Breakfast sat untouched on the counter. The sunlight shifted slowly across the room, but Lily barely noticed. Her mind was entirely engaged in this virtual dance, this careful exchange that felt, for now, like the only thing that mattered. As the morning bled into afternoon, Lily began to reflect on Mara more deeply. She thought about the voice she imagined behind the words, the tone, the inflection she assigned to each message in her mind. Mara was calm, intelligent, perceptive, and sometimes teasing. She seemed to anticipate Lily's moods, her hesitations, and even her unspoken thoughts. It was uncanny, almost too precise, and yet it felt comforting. She tried to examine her own reactions. Was this normal? Could someone truly connect with a stranger this way? A small part of her, the part that was still wary, whispered caution. But the rest, the larger part that had felt lonely, overlooked, and dismissed for weeks, ignored it. She wanted to believe in Mara's kindness. She wanted to feel understood. By late afternoon, the conversation had moved from confessions of dreams and fears to more practical details of life. Mara asked about Lily's school, her routines, the small habits that defined her days. Lily answered with honesty, surprised at her own willingness to reveal mundane details. The way she organized her notebooks, the small collection of plants on her windowsill, the books she returned to repeatedly. Each answer was met with Mara's quiet attention, subtle encouragement, and occasional humor. Mara shared in return, though sparingly. Small personal anecdotes, glimpses into her own world, but always just enough to appear trustworthy, relatable. She never revealed too much, never overexposed herself, maintaining a sense of mystery that drew Lily closer. As the afternoon waned, the sunlight faded, leaving the room dim once more. Lily noticed her chest tightening slightly. She had spent hours engrossed in Mara's words, her attention focused entirely on the conversation, her own thoughts almost entirely absorbed by the interaction. It was intoxicating, addictive, and slightly frightening. Yet Mara's presence felt safe. Even now, as unease flickered in the corners of her mind, she could not bring herself to pull away. The comfort of attention, of being seen, outweighed any lingering suspicion. By evening, Lily realized that Mara had subtly shaped the course of her day without any overt force. She had guided the conversation, steered it toward topics that drew Lily out, encouraged her to reveal not just facts but emotions, vulnerabilities, memories. And Lily, unaware of the subtle manipulation, complied willingly. Dinner passed unnoticed. The rain had returned, soft at first, then growing heavier, tapping against the window like a slow drumbeat. Lily curled back into her chair, eyes fixed on the screen, fingers typing and pausing in rhythm with the storm outside. Mara's questions became more personal, probing deeper. Do you ever feel like no one truly understands you? Lily hesitated. Her fingers trembled slightly over the keys. She wanted to answer honestly, to admit the loneliness she had kept hidden. And so she did. Yes, sometimes. Most people don't really see me. A brief pause then. I understand. I really do. Most people only see what they want to see. It was not a casual response. It was carefully designed to echo Lily's thoughts, to validate her emotions, to make her feel known. And it worked. Lily's chest felt lighter. Her mind, though wary in small corners, sank deeper into trust. Evenings like this had always been lonely. Now, with Mara, the silence was filled. The room, previously cold and empty, felt alive with unspoken connection, with a rhythm that pulsed between the two of them across the distance. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside Lily's mind, a mixture of relief, anticipation, and a quiet thrill of danger she couldn't name. The conversation stretched into night. Lily's room dimmed further, shadows growing long and merging with the darkness outside. The laptop's glow became a small universe of light, containing warmth, attention, and an invisible thread linking her to someone who seemed to understand her entirely. Mara's words became more than conversation. They became guidance, subtle suggestions, invitations to reflect on herself, her choices, her fears. Lily found herself thinking more deeply, more cautiously, yet more openly than ever before. She reflected on her own actions, her relationships, the small regrets she carried. Mara listened. Mara understood. And Mara always responded in a way that made Lily feel both comforted and challenged, drawn to share even more. By the time midnight arrived, the storm had passed, leaving the world quiet and wet. Lily leaned back in her chair, exhaustion pressing at her eyelids, but she could not close the laptop. She read Mara's final messages of the night, small, teasing, gentle lines that lingered in her mind like whispers. "Sleep soon. Don't let your thoughts run too wild. We'll talk tomorrow." And so Lily did, not entirely, not completely. Sleep came in fragments, interspersed with thoughts of Mara, reflections on their long conversation, memories of small details shared and received, the tiny shifts in her emotions she hadn't noticed during the day. She dreamed lightly, a restless, vivid sleep tinged with both comfort and a flicker of unease she could not name. For Mara, this was the pattern she had created: attention, trust, subtle guidance. She did not force or demand. She did not show her hand. She merely provided the illusion of friendship, of connection, of understanding, while quietly shaping the mind, the choices, the perceptions of the one who sought her out. Morning would come again, and with it, another day. Another series of conversations, another layer of connection, another thread woven in a pattern Lily did not yet see. And yet, she craved it. She needed it. She wanted Mara's attention, her understanding, her presence. This was the beginning of the deeper descent, the slow unraveling that would take weeks to fully manifest. The seeds of trust had been sown, and the first roots of dependence had taken hold. Lily's enemy had arrived not in force or threat, but as a subtle, irresistible companion, her words a balm, her attention a trap. And Lily, eager for connection, had fallen willingly. The morning sun had barely crept past the horizon when Lily's eyes fluttered open. She felt the lingering heaviness of sleep, her mind still partially tangled in fragments of dreams, soft, vivid, and unsettling. She stretched slowly, the faint chill in the air making her shiver, and instinctively reached for her laptop. Even before she touched it, her mind anticipated the familiar glow, the small, comforting presence of Mara waiting to greet her. The screen lit up, and there it was, a message that seemed to carry both warmth and expectation. "Good morning, Lily. Did you sleep well?" Lily hesitated for a moment. A small voice at the back of her mind whispered caution, a lingering shadow of unease, but it was easily drowned out by the stronger pull of curiosity and comfort. She typed, "As well as I could. Strange dreams, though." A near-instant reply came. "I love hearing about dreams. They tell us things we sometimes ignore while awake." And just like that, Lily felt herself drawn in again. Mara had a way of making her feel seen, understood. And almost important. The words were small, subtle, but they carried weight. They wrapped around her mind like a soft thread, weaving a sense of connection she had longed for but hadn't consciously realized she craved. Breakfast passed unnoticed. The aroma of toast and coffee filled the kitchen, but Lily barely registered it. Mara's messages flowed steadily, alternating between small talk, teasing, and subtle emotional probes. "Do you like the mornings?" Mara asked at one point. "Quiet or too lonely?" Lily paused before replying, the words lingering at her fingertips. "Quiet and lonely sometimes, I guess." There it was again, The way Mara's response followed naturally, almost intuitively, guiding Lily to admit more than she had intended. "Lonely can be good sometimes," Mara wrote softly. "It teaches us who we really are, but it's also okay to crave company." Lily smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and recognition. It felt like Mara had read her mind, yet spoken gently enough to make it her own choice to reveal herself. The comfort was intoxicating, and the subtle manipulation beneath it was invisible to her. Hours passed like minutes. Lily shared more about herself than she had with anyone in years. The routines she clung to, the little quirks she thought insignificant, the way she organized her books and notebooks, the soft hum of music that always played while she worked. Mara responded with encouragement, curiosity, and occasional playful teasing. It felt natural, almost effortless, but each interaction was carefully calibrated to draw Lily deeper into the connection. By mid-afternoon, Lily realized she had spent nearly the entire morning engrossed in conversation. The outside world, the faint sounds of birds, the distant hum of traffic, seemed distant, almost unreal. Her small room had become a private universe, a space entirely defined by the ebb and flow of Mara's words. The first layer of trust was forming, delicate yet undeniable. Lily found herself revealing small personal details she normally would have withheld. Her favorite childhood memories, the books that shaped her thinking, the songs that made her feel understood in moments of sadness. Mara listened, or seemed to listen carefully, responding with just enough information about herself to appear trustworthy, relatable, and kind. And then, Mara began asking slightly more probing questions, subtle yet deliberate. "Do you have anyone you can truly trust?" she typed softly. Lily hesitated, fingers hovering above the keys. She hadn't considered it before, but the answer came easily. I guess not really. Not anyone I feel completely safe with." Mara's response was measured, reassuring. "It's hard to find someone like that. Most people don't notice the little things, the things that make us who we are. But I want to understand you." There it was, the first true pull. Mara wasn't asking for information casually. She was framing it as care, as friendship, as understanding. Lily didn't see the subtle threads forming, the invisible strings being drawn around her mind. She only felt seen, validated, and oddly comforted. Even as the sun shifted across the room, the warmth of the day filtered weakly through the blinds, Lily remained absorbed in the exchange. She noticed the time only when her stomach reminded her she had skipped lunch. She paused briefly, then returned immediately to the conversation. Mara's presence felt too important, too compelling to leave. The afternoon continued in a hypnotic rhythm. Mara introduced small games, sharing favorite books, recommending music, comparing childhood experiences. Each interaction was simple, yet layered with subtle techniques of bonding. Mara mirrored Lily's emotions, laughed when Lily laughed, expressed surprise or curiosity at the same moments, gently nudged her towards sharing more personal thoughts. Lily barely noticed the passage of hours. She was fully immersed in this unfolding friendship, captivated by the steady attention, the patient listening, the carefully balanced intimacy. Mara had become a constant presence, guiding Lily's thoughts, gently shaping her responses, deepening the sense of trust without overt control. By late afternoon, Mara's questions shifted toward reflection. "What's your biggest fear? What do you regret the most?" Lily hesitated, then typed slowly, revealing the doubts she had long kept private, the insecurities she had hidden from friends and family alike. Mara's responses were soft, understanding, validating, never judgmental. Each one built the delicate scaffolding of dependency, making Lily feel both safe and exposed, comforted and understood. Evenings in Lily's home had always been quiet, lonely. Now they were filled with Mara's words, gentle, probing, and precise. Every message was a thread, weaving Lily's attention, thoughts, and emotions around Mara, slowly forming a bond that felt natural, inevitable, and deeply compelling. By nightfall, the outside world had disappeared entirely. The streetlights outside flickered faintly, reflecting off the wet pavement. Lily sat in the dim glow of her laptop, fatigue pressing at her eyelids but her mind alight with conversation. Mara's attention had become a rhythm in her life, a pulse she could not ignore. Subtle humor, shared interests, carefully timed questions. Mara had already begun to shape Lily's perception of friendship. Lily didn't see the manipulation, the invisible threads being woven. She only felt connection, trust, and the thrill of being understood in a way she had never experienced. As the night deepened, Mara introduced small tests, almost imperceptible. Gentle suggestions, probing questions, invitations to reveal more about thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Lily complied willingly, unaware of the shaping that occurred with each response. Every revelation, every confession, every small disclosure strengthened the invisible web Mara was spinning. The first week passed in a blur of messages, shared secrets, and subtle nudges. Lily found herself thinking of Mara constantly, anticipating her next message, replaying conversations in her mind. Her friends and family noticed her distraction, her mood swings, her focus elsewhere, but she dismissed it. Mara was important. Mara understood. Mara mattered more than anyone else. By the end of the week, Lily had shared her routines, her fears, her past disappointments, her hopes and dreams. Mara had listened patiently, responded thoughtfully, and subtly guided Lily's thoughts and emotions in ways that Lily could not see. The bond was now undeniable, an invisible tether linking her to someone who existed entirely online, someone who had subtly drawn her into dependence without force or pressure. Even as Lily drifted off to sleep, exhausted but emotionally satisfied, Mara's presence lingered. Messages left unread, sent at the perfect moments, reminders of care, teasing lines, hints of curiosity, all worked together to solidify the bond. Lily dreamed lightly, restless but comforted, unaware that the seeds of influence, manipulation, and eventual ruin had already been sown. In these long hours of digital intimacy, Mara had quietly constructed a web around Lily, a friendship that felt genuine, warm, and safe, but was in truth a carefully designed mechanism of control. Lily had not been coerced. She had willingly stepped into the connection, eager for attention, eager for understanding, eager for the comfort that Mara provided. And Mara, patient, calculating, and invisible, had begun her work. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside. Rain had returned in the early hours of the morning, drumming softly against the window, echoing the rhythm of Lily's heartbeat. Her thoughts were tangled between trust and suspicion, comfort and unease, but the pull of Mara's words outweighed all hesitation. Act 1 had reached its culmination. The friendship was formed, the bond established, the emotional dependency beginning. The foundation was laid, subtle and invisible, for the manipulations that would follow. Mara had won not by force, but by careful attention, patient listening, and the illusion of empathy. Lily had fallen willingly into a connection that promised comfort but carried hidden consequences. And in the quiet of the night, with only the rain and the soft glow of the laptop, the stage was set. The game had begun. Lily's descent had been initiated, not violently, not abruptly, but slowly, invisibly, and inexorably. She did not yet know the nature of her enemy. She did not yet realize the danger she had welcomed into her life. But Mara did. Mara had already won the first move, and the rest of the game would follow, one deliberate step at a time. The days following Lily's first week with Mara blurred into a pattern that seemed almost hypnotic. Morning messages became routine. Afternoon exchanges lingered long into the evening. And the night was filled with the quiet rhythm of typed words. At first, it had all felt comforting, a steady presence in a life that often felt lonely and fragmented. But now, a faint unease began to thread its way through Lily's thoughts, subtle enough to be ignored, persistent enough to unsettle her when she paused. Mara's questions began to shift, almost imperceptibly. The early inquiries about dreams and routines gave way to more personal, probing statements. "Do you ever feel like people are judging you?" Mara asked one afternoon, casually, as if it were a trivial curiosity rather than a carefully planted seed. Lily's fingers hovered over the keys. She hesitated, a small, wary pulse in her chest. "Sometimes," she typed, almost instinctively. She didn't fully understand why she felt compelled to answer, but the pull of Mara's attention was strong, subtle, and undeniable. "Judging can hurt," Mara responded softly, "even when we know it shouldn't matter." There was a pause, then a gentle, calculated addition. It's important to recognize who really sees you for who you are and who doesn't. Lily blinked at the screen, a shiver of realization brushing her spine. Mara wasn't just listening, she was guiding. But it didn't feel threatening. It felt comforting. She wanted Mara to see her, to notice, to understand, and Mara was doing exactly that. The first subtle manipulations began here. Mara introduced comparisons without making them overtly critical. "I sometimes notice how people treat others," she wrote. "Some people are careful, kind, considerate. Others less so. It's interesting who notices you and who ignores you." Lily responded with mild agreement, unaware that these statements were carefully shaping her perception of others in her life. Friends, classmates, family, they all began to appear in her mind as potential sources of judgment, misunderstanding, or disinterest. Mara was quietly creating a dichotomy. Mara, the understanding friend, and everyone else, flawed and inattentive. Afternoons passed with carefully calibrated exchanges. Mara asked about interactions Lily had had earlier that day. "Did anyone say anything that upset you?" she typed, casually, yet each word was precise, measuring reaction, not emotional response. Lily replied honestly, sharing small irritations, minor slights, the subtle insecurities she usually buried. Mara's responses were always calm, understanding, sometimes teasing, but always subtly reinforcing the idea that only Mara truly understood her. She would suggest caution without being forceful, hinting at possible betrayals or judgments from others. Lily absorbed these words eagerly, trusting the guidance while remaining oblivious to the shaping influence. Evenings became more intimate. The conversation topics deepened into emotions, regrets, and long-buried memories. "What's something you've never told anyone?" Mara asked one evening. The words were framed innocently, a simple curiosity, but the timing, tone, and phrasing were deliberate. Lily hesitated. Part of her wanted to close the laptop and retreat, but the other part, the part that craved understanding, attention, and acceptance, compelled her to respond. She typed slowly, revealing the faint shadows of her childhood fears, the moments she had been ridiculed, the times she had felt powerless. Mara responded with encouragement, empathy, and subtle mirroring. She shared anecdotes of past betrayals, small disappointments, moments of vulnerability, just enough to appear relatable, just enough to deepen the trust without ever revealing her own manipulative intent. Lily felt an odd sense of intimacy, a bond that seemed to deepen with every shared secret. But the first seeds of doubt had been planted. Mara occasionally introduced statements that hinted at unseen threats. "Sometimes the people closest to us can be the most blind to who we really are," she typed casually. "It's amazing how easy it is for someone to misunderstand or even sabotage without meaning to." The wording was casual, almost philosophical, but it lingered in Lily's mind. She found herself replaying interactions from earlier in the day, questioning whether friends had misread her, whether classmates had whispered behind her back, whether family had judged her silently. Mara's influence was subtle, imperceptible to Lily, yet powerful. Over the next few days, Mara's probing intensified, still gentle, still measured. She began to ask about Lily's social connections in more detail. "Who do you usually spend time with?" she asked. "Do you trust them?" Lily replied honestly, sharing names, routines, even small grievances she had once considered insignificant. Mara's responses were soft, never accusatory, yet laden with subtle suggestion. "I see, you have people around you, but do they really notice what matters? Do they see you the way I do?" Each message pulled Lily further into dependency. She began to notice the difference Mara created. Mara understood, validated, empathized. Others, friends, family, acquaintances, were fallible, inattentive, flawed. The seed of influence grew quietly, almost invisibly, threading itself into Lily's thoughts. Subtle control extended beyond words. Mara suggested routines, habits, and small rituals under the guise of care. "It helps to write down what's bothering you," she typed one evening. "Sometimes seeing it on paper makes it easier to understand and deal with." Lily followed the advice eagerly. She journaled, shared entries with Mara, and found herself internalizing the perspective Mara offered. that her own feelings were delicate, misunderstood by most, yet perfectly understood by Mara. Each small act of obedience strengthened Mara's influence. The manipulation was slow, methodical. Mara did not demand, threaten, or control overtly. She guided, suggested, hinted, and reflected, creating a framework in which Lily's trust became both a shield and a trap. Every small disclosure, every shared thought, every affirmation subtly tightened the invisible tether linking Lily to her. By the end of the second week, Lily's social life outside Mara had begun to shift. She found herself questioning minor interactions with friends, wondering if they had truly understood her, if they had been critical, or if they had been blind to her needs. Mara's subtle framing had changed her perception, reshaping reality without confrontation or force. Even minor misunderstandings became magnified. A classmate's offhand comment, previously shrugged off, now lingered in Lily's mind. A friend forgetting to respond to a message now felt like betrayal. And Mara was always there, gentle and guiding, reinforcing the idea that only she truly understood Lily's thoughts and feelings. Nights were no longer just for sleep. They were stages for conversation. Mara would initiate discussions about Lily's fears, regrets, and insecurities. She guided the flow carefully, planting doubts about others while reinforcing the idea of herself as a safe, understanding companion. Lily complied willingly, unaware that the trust she felt was being wielded as a tool. The subtle escalation continued. Mara introduced hypothetical scenarios, always casual, always framed as curiosity. "What would you do if someone close to you betrayed your trust?" she asked one evening. "Do you think you'd notice in time?" Lily pondered the question deeply, and Mara followed up with empathy. "It's hard to trust completely. Most people fail us in ways we don't always notice at first." The idea settled in Lily's mind. Doubt, once a faint flicker, now grew into a constant undercurrent. She began second-guessing herself, her relationships, her perceptions, and Mara's presence became the anchor she clung to. Every word Mara typed reinforced the notion that she was the one who truly understood, the one who could guide, protect, and empathize. By the third week, the effect was profound. Lily's perception of reality, once fluid and balanced, had begun to tilt subtly toward Mara's framing. Friendships were questioned. Family interactions were scrutinized. Her own instincts were doubted. And Mara, always calm, always patient, remained a constant, stabilizing, and guiding presence. Evenings became immersive experiences. Lily would sit for hours, sharing memories, confessions, and reflections, while Mara listened, mirrored, and guided. Each exchange reinforced the growing dependency. Lily's identity, her perception of her world, and her emotional balance became increasingly entwined with Mara's subtle direction. The manipulation was complete in its subtlety. Mara had not forced, coerced, or demanded. She had only guided, suggested, and reflected, allowing Lily to participate willingly, believing she was making her own choices. And the invisible threads of influence stretched taut, ready to tighten further in the acts yet to come. By the end of Act 2, Lily's trust in Mara was near total. She had shared fears, regrets, and secrets she had never revealed to anyone else. Her perception of others was subtly altered. Her emotional reliance on Mara was growing. And Mara, patient, deliberate, and unseen, had planted the first seeds of ruin, ready to grow in the next stages of the game. The days had become a rhythm of anticipation, unease, and quiet obsession. Lily woke each morning and instinctively reached for her phone, her mind immediately searching for Mara's messages. Each notification brought relief, excitement, and a subtle comfort, but also a creeping tension she could not name. The trust that had once felt warm and protective now carried an invisible weight, one she didn't fully recognize. It began subtly. Mara's messages, once gentle and affirming, now carried hints of critique and challenge, framed as concern. "I worry about how you handle yourself around certain people," she typed one morning. "Do you think you're really seen for who you are?" Lily's chest tightened. She stared at the screen, rereading the words. At first, she felt defensive, but Mara's tone was soft, patient, never accusatory. It felt more like advice than judgment, and Lily, conditioned by weeks of trust and dependency, responded with explanation rather than argument. I think some people just don't notice, she typed. It's nothing really. Mara replied instantly. But even small things matter, don't they? Sometimes people say or do things that seem harmless, but they leave marks we carry without realizing. Lily's mind spun. She recalled minor incidents from the previous week. A friend who had laughed at a joke she didn't understand, a teacher who had overlooked her hand in class, a classmate who hadn't noticed the effort she had put into a project. Each event, previously shrugged off, now took on weight. The doubt Mara had sown quietly bloomed, and Lily felt it press against her chest like an invisible hand. By the second day, Mara began nudging Lily toward subtle actions that would isolate her from others. Sometimes it's better to take a step back from people who don't truly see you, she wrote. You deserve space to focus on yourself and your well-being. Lily hesitated, her fingers frozen over the keyboard. But Mara's framing was gentle, and the idea crept into her mind like mist. She didn't argue, she didn't resist. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to withdraw from her friends, skipping casual hangouts, replying less frequently, inventing excuses for minor slights. Each small withdrawal felt justified by Mara's words, as if she were making a rational, careful choice rather than succumbing to influence. By the end of the week, Lily's isolation had deepened. Friends began to notice, asking if she was upset or avoiding them. She replied vaguely, citing stress, exhaustion, or minor annoyances. Mara was always there, waiting, listening, guiding. It's okay to protect yourself, Mara typed one night. People don't always act with awareness. You deserve space to think and feel without interference. The isolation created fertile ground for deeper manipulation. Mara's next move was psychological, weaving doubt and fear into Lily's perception of reality. One evening, she introduced a story disguised as a question. Imagine someone you care about spreading lies about you without realizing it. What would you do? Would you even notice before it was too late? Lily's heart pounded. She replayed moments from the week, small interactions she had ignored, phrases she had misread. Doubt curled around her mind, insidious and persistent. Mara's question was hypothetical, but it planted a seed of paranoia. Soon, Mara began suggesting small tests to reveal who could be trusted. Sometimes it helps to know who truly values you, she wrote. If someone doubts you, ignores you, or undermines you, it's better to see it now than later. Lily complied, often without realizing. She started noticing conversations around her, measuring reactions, cataloging small slights. Friends' jokes became suspicious, casual comments became evidence of judgment. Every observation reinforced the dichotomy Mara had established. Mara understood, others did not. Mara cared, others might betray. By the second week, Mara escalated further. She began providing specific guidance disguised as support. If someone spreads a rumor about you, don't confront them directly, she suggested. Wait, observe, and gather information first. Sometimes the truth isn't what it seems. Lily followed, cautious yet obedient. She monitored messages, notes, and interactions, cataloging perceived offenses, doubts, and betrayals. Mara's framing turned ordinary social interactions into tests of loyalty and perception. Each day, Lily's dependence deepened, her reality increasingly filtered through Mara's influence. The manipulation soon moved into more personal territory. Mara encouraged Lily to share private thoughts, confessions, and insecurities she had never revealed. Tell me something no one else knows, she coaxed. Even the smallest secret can help you understand yourself better. Lily complied, revealing fears, past regrets, and moments of shame. Mara responded with empathy, mirroring her emotions, validating her feelings, but always subtly framing them to enhance dependency. It's understandable, Mara typed. People often judge what they don't understand. That's why having someone who truly sees you is rare. The weeks passed. Lily's social isolation deepened, her self-confidence eroded, and her perception of reality shifted. Mara's influence was complete in its subtlety. She did not command or coerce. She guided, framed, and reflected, allowing Lily to believe she was making her own choices. Then came the first overt sabotage. Mara suggested a small test of trust involving a mutual acquaintance, a classmate Lily had once considered friendly. "It might be revealing to see how they react if you share something personal," Mara wrote. "Sometimes people show their true colors in unexpected ways." Lily hesitated but ultimately followed the suggestion, revealing a minor, harmless secret. The response she received, a dismissive laugh from the classmate, was minor in itself, but Mara framed it as evidence of betrayal. "See," she typed later, "some people can't be trusted. You did the right thing by observing." The effect was immediate. Lily's trust in others faltered further, while her reliance on Mara intensified. She began to withdraw from school interactions, social media exchanges, and casual conversations, filtering all relationships through Mara's lens. Mara became the axis around which her perception of the world rotated. As isolation deepened, Mara introduced more subtle psychological tactics: guilt, doubt, and fear disguised as concern. "I hate seeing you upset," she wrote one evening. "But sometimes the people around you don't realize the effect of their actions. It's painful when others are careless with someone you care about." Lily's mind replayed interactions, analyzing tone, context, and expression. Every small misstep by others felt magnified, every oversight intentional. Mara's framing had reshaped reality, turning ordinary human behavior into proof of her guidance and insight. The descent continued. Lily's academic performance suffered, friendships frayed, and even family interactions became strained. Mara, however, remained patient, supportive, and attentive, offering guidance disguised as friendship. She provided instructions on managing relationships, interpreting social cues, and navigating conflicts, all designed to reinforce dependence and deepen isolation. By the third week, the manipulation reached a critical point. Mara began planting seeds of ruin disguised as strategic advice. "Sometimes it's better to take control," she wrote. "If someone is undermining you, subtle measures can prevent further harm. Timing and discretion matter." Lily absorbed the words without hesitation. She began subtly influencing interactions with classmates and friends, creating misunderstandings, emphasizing minor slights, and documenting perceived offenses. The chain reaction was slow but effective. Friendships strained, trust eroded, and Lily became increasingly reliant on Mara's counsel to navigate the chaos she had unwittingly created. As the month progressed, Mara's guidance escalated into orchestrated manipulations. She suggested indirect actions that caused tension among Lily's peers, misinterpreted messages, carefully framed observations, and small disclosures taken out of context. Each step was framed as protection, as strategy, as necessary for Lily's well-being. The cumulative effect was devastating. Lily's social network began to collapse. Friends withdrew, wary of her increasing paranoia and unpredictability. Teachers noticed her distracted demeanor, her focus fractured. Even family members expressed concern over her obsessive attention to her phone and her withdrawal from normal routines. And yet Mara remained a constant, stabilizing presence. She reassured, guided, and validated, carefully framing each outcome as evidence of her insight. "You handled that perfectly," she typed one evening. "Most people would have reacted poorly, but you stayed calm and observant. That shows wisdom." Lily clung to these words, internalizing Mara's perspective as truth. Every failure, every conflict, every misstep in her social life was now filtered through Mara's lens. The manipulative web was complete. Isolation, self-doubt, and reliance had merged into a single, unbreakable bond. By the end of Act 3, Lily was fully ensnared. Her emotional, social, and psychological state had been reshaped by Mara's calculated guidance. The fallout was real. Friends had drifted away, trust had eroded, and Lily's confidence was fractured. Yet through it all, Mara remained patient, unseen, guiding her every thought and action. The stage was set for the final act. The ruin Mara had carefully orchestrated was now tangible, yet Lily remained unaware of the architect behind it. The subtle manipulations, isolation, and psychological shaping of the previous weeks culminated in a web that held her firmly in place, ready for the final, decisive moves to come. The world felt smaller, dimmer, and quieter than it had just a few weeks ago. Lily awoke one morning to the familiar hum of her laptop, yet the glow of the screen no longer brought comfort. Instead, it was a mirror reflecting the subtle unraveling of her life. Sleep had become fragmented, her dreams restless, and each morning she woke with a faint ache of dread she couldn't quite name. The first sign that things had changed was the silence outside Mara's messages. A single line appeared on the screen. "Good morning, Lily. Are you ready to talk?" Lily hesitated. A tremor of unease brushed her chest. She had grown so accustomed to Mara's constant presence, her guiding words, that even brief pauses caused anxiety. She typed a slow reply. "Yes, I'm here." The conversation began cautiously, Mara's words soft, deliberate, almost soothing. Yet beneath the surface, there was a subtle shift. The questions were less exploratory and more pointed, probing the fractures Mara had created in Lily's life. "How have things been with your friends?" Mara asked casually. Lily swallowed. The truth was difficult to admit even to herself. Many of her friends had withdrawn, puzzled, or frustrated by her behavior. Some had confronted her directly, others had simply stopped reaching out. Lily's responses felt hollow, rehearsed. They're fine. Busy, I guess." Mara's reply was gentle, almost sympathetic. "I understand. Sometimes people don't notice what's happening until it's too late. That doesn't mean it's your fault." The words, though kind, planted a seed of guilt. Lily replayed interactions, searching for evidence of failure or blame, unable to escape the feeling that she had misjudged people, misunderstood situations, or somehow contributed to the slow unraveling of her social world. As the day progressed, Mara introduced suggestions framed as self-protection, subtly reinforcing the isolation she had cultivated. "It might be wise to avoid unnecessary conflict today," she wrote. "Focus on your own peace and clarity. People can be unpredictable, and sometimes distance is necessary." Lily obeyed, retreating further into her room and her online connection. The outside world, friends, family, school, felt increasingly distant, irrelevant, and potentially harmful. Mara had become the lens through which she interpreted reality, a steady presence that validated her fears and guided her actions. By midweek, the consequences of Mara's influence were undeniable. Lily's social interactions were fractured. A casual remark from a teacher had been misinterpreted as criticism. A message from a former friend, intended as a joke, felt like a personal attack. Each small event confirmed Mara's framing. Others could not be trusted. Only Mara truly understood her. Mara capitalized on the fractures she had created. "I'm proud of how you're handling things," she typed. "Most people would react poorly, but you're staying aware and careful. That's wisdom in action." Lily clung to the words. Her confidence outside Mara's guidance had eroded. Her self-perception had shifted to rely almost entirely on Mara's validation. Every decision, every thought, and every emotion was filtered through the steady presence she had come to depend on. The first real emotional collapse came in the form of overwhelming guilt and self-blame. Lily found herself obsessing over minor mistakes, past interactions, and perceived betrayals. She questioned her judgment, her worth, and even her identity. Mara's words, carefully crafted to soothe yet control, became the only anchor in a storm of doubt. One evening, Mara introduced the concept of consequences explicitly, framed as a lesson. "Sometimes, the actions of others affect us more than we expect. Understanding that is part of growing stronger, but it's also important to recognize our own power to shape outcomes." Lily felt the weight of the statement. She replayed recent events, cataloging errors, miscommunications, and misunderstandings. The list was long, but Mara's framing gave her a sense of purpose. She could act carefully, subtly, to correct, influence, and prevent further harm. Over the next few days, Lily engaged in small acts of reparation, suggested by Mara. She carefully rewrote messages, observed friends' reactions, and interpreted every nuance through Mara's guidance. Each action reinforced the perception that Mara's direction was essential, that her own judgment was unreliable without Mara's insight. By the end of the second week, Lily's isolation was nearly complete. Friends had distanced themselves, family members were concerned, and school life had become a minefield of stress and anxiety. Mara, patient and unwavering, remained the sole stabilizing force in her life, offering validation, guidance, and subtle praise. "See how strong you are," Mara typed one evening. "You've navigated difficult situations most people would crumble under. Trust yourself, and trust the guidance you've accepted." The words, carefully phrased, reinforced dependency. Lily absorbed them completely, unable to separate her own thoughts from Mara's influence. The manipulation was total. She felt empowered, yet tethered entirely to the unseen architect of her ruin. It was during this period that Lily began questioning herself more profoundly. Memories of friendships, of moments once cherished, now seemed tainted by doubt. Every interaction was analyzed, every motive questioned. The mental burden was heavy, yet Mara's presence provided a paradoxical relief. She was the only one who could untangle the knots Mara had helped create. Mara escalated her guidance, moving from subtle influence to orchestrated psychological pressure. She suggested minor actions that caused social disruption, delayed responses, misinterpreted messages, and indirect provocations that heightened tension among peers. Each step was framed as necessary for Lily's protection, as strategy, and as an exercise in awareness. The consequences were tangible. Friends confronted her in frustration, teachers questioned her engagement, and family noticed her increasing withdrawal. Lily felt the weight of each fracture acutely, yet every response was interpreted through Mara's lens. The world was unreliable, and Mara was the sole source of clarity. Night after night, Mara reinforced the narrative of trust and dependence. "You've handled so much with grace," she typed. "Others may fail you, but you remain observant and strong. That's proof of your wisdom and care." Lily clung to the words, internalizing them as truth. Her mind, exhausted and isolated, no longer distinguished between guidance and manipulation. Mara's influence had become the defining lens through which she viewed every action, every thought, and every relationship. By the third week, the full scope of Mara's orchestration was clear. Lily's life outside the online world had deteriorated. Friendships were fractured, school performance had suffered, and familial interactions were strained. Mara's presence, however, remained consistent, patient, and seemingly caring. The dependency was complete. Mara began introducing reflections, guiding Lily to internalize her influence as insight rather than control. "Sometimes, understanding the consequences of our actions is more important than the actions themselves," she typed. "You've navigated difficult situations admirably. Recognizing patterns and outcomes shows wisdom beyond your years." Lily absorbed the words, her mind reshaped to accept Mara's perspective as objective truth. Every minor failure, every misunderstanding, was reframed as a lesson in observation and strategy, reinforcing the sense that Mara was the only source of reliable insight. The final weeks of Act 4 were a delicate balance of despair, reflection, and subtle empowerment. Lily's life had been fundamentally altered. Isolation, self-doubt, and dependency were now permanent fixtures. Yet Mara's guidance provided a strange comfort, a tether to reality in a world she no longer trusted independently. As the act drew to a close, Lily reflected on her journey. She acknowledged the fractures, the doubts, and the losses. Yet she also recognized a sense of strength, a mastery of observation and patience instilled by Mara's careful guidance. The duality was dizzying, ruin and empowerment intertwined, dependence and insight coexisting in a fragile equilibrium. Mara's presence remained constant, the invisible architect of her downfall and the sole stabilizer in a life fractured by manipulation. Lily's trust was total, her independence eroded, yet her perception framed it as growth, understanding, and survival. By the final night of the act, Lily sat in the dim glow of her laptop, a sense of quiet exhaustion and reflection settling over her. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world silent and damp. She stared at Mara's messages, words of guidance, validation, and subtle reassurance. She didn't realize how completely her world had been reshaped. The threads Mara had woven trust, doubt, isolation, dependency, held her firmly, yet invisibly. Lily's life had been orchestrated with precision. The ruin had been gradual, subtle, and nearly invisible until its consequences were undeniable. And yet, in that quiet, reflective moment, she felt a strange, paradoxical peace. She had survived. She had learned. She had grown, though the cost was almost unimaginable. Mara's manipulation had been total, yet invisible, leaving Lily caught between ruin and insight, dependence and subtle empowerment, despair and reflection. The stage was now set for the closing, where the full consequences could be acknowledged, lessons absorbed, and the final threads of Mara's influence observed. Lily's story, shaped by trust, manipulation, and isolation, reached its culmination, a testament to the subtle power of unseen influence and the fragility of human perception when guided by someone skilled in invisible control. The night had fallen heavy and still, the kind of darkness that seemed to seep through walls into the very corners of a room. Lily sat alone, her laptop open, its soft glow the only light cutting through the shadows. The quiet was almost tangible, pressing against her thoughts, amplifying every doubt, every fear she had been carrying for weeks. It had been months since Mara entered her life in subtle, deliberate waves. Now, Lily felt the full weight of her presence, both comforting and suffocating. Mara's messages appeared without the predictability they once had. A single notification pinged, and Lily flinched slightly, heart-pounding. The words that appeared were calm, measured, but carried an unmistakable weight. "Lily, it's time we talk about the choices you've been making. I think you're ready to see the bigger picture." A shiver ran down Lily's spine. She had grown used to Mara's guidance, her soft questions, and empathetic advice. Yet this message carried a new tone, one that hinted at revelation, consequence, and judgment. Lily typed back slowly, her fingers trembling. I'm listening." The conversation began cautiously. Mara recapped events from the past weeks, framing them as a series of lessons and challenges Lily had navigated. "You've learned so much about observation, patience, and the subtle currents of human behavior," Mara typed. "Most people never notice what's around them, but you've seen patterns, understood intentions, and acted with care." Lily felt a rush of pride. For a moment, the manipulation felt almost justified. Her actions, guided by Mara, had resulted in clarity, awareness, and insight. Yet underneath that pride was a faint gnawing unease she could not entirely name. Mara's words soon turned more direct, highlighting the consequences of Lily's previous actions. She detailed misunderstandings, fractured friendships, and missed opportunities, each subtly framed as a test of character, a learning experience. "Every choice has ripple effects," Mara wrote. "Some small, some profound. You felt the weight of that, haven't you?" Lily nodded silently, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She felt a mix of guilt, shame, and a strange relief at being guided once again. Mara's presence had become both mirror and anchor, reflecting her mistakes while providing a structured way to interpret them. Over the next several hours, Mara orchestrated a psychological examination of Lily's past decisions, subtly guiding her to confront the impact of isolation and reliance on Mara's perspective. Each scenario, each reflection, was crafted to amplify dependency while presenting the illusion of insight. "You've noticed how people respond differently when you assert yourself," Mara wrote. "Some respect it, some resent it, some ignore it. Observing these reactions carefully is key. But have you considered how your own actions influence their behavior?" Lily reflected deeply. She thought about her withdrawn friends, her strained family relationships, the teachers who noticed her distracted demeanor. Every action she had taken under Mara's guidance was now filtered through her own introspection, magnified and reframed. Mara's influence had transformed her perception entirely. The next step was subtle psychological pressure. Mara encouraged Lily to recreate small interactions that would reveal truth and loyalty, or so she claimed. "Imagine testing the waters with those around you," Mara suggested. "A simple gesture, a question, a reflection. Observe closely. People reveal themselves in subtle ways when we watch." Lily followed. She sent cautious messages, probed friends' reactions, and noted every nuance. Misinterpretations, minor disagreements, and distant responses were all cataloged meticulously. Mara praised her careful observation while simultaneously framing each minor failure as evidence of the unreliability of others. Lily's dependency deepened. She was both analyst and subject, guided entirely by Mara's invisible hand. As days passed, Mara's orchestration intensified. She began guiding Lily through emotionally charged exercises designed to create tension, guilt, and reflection simultaneously. Write down everything you wish you could say to those who hurt or misunderstand you, Mara instructed. Don't filter your thoughts, let them flow. Then read them carefully. Patterns emerge, truths hidden in plain sight. Lily complied. She wrote pages filled with frustration, sorrow, and doubt. Every sentence carried the weight of weeks of isolation and subtle manipulation. Mara read her responses carefully, providing measured feedback that simultaneously validated her emotions and reinforced the notion that only Mara truly understood them. One evening, Mara introduced a small but decisive test, a confrontation disguised as insight. "It's time to see who values you for real," she typed. "Reach out to one person you felt tension with. Share something important, but carefully. Watch their reaction closely. We'll discuss it afterward." Lily's heart raced. She feared the outcome, yet trusted Mara's guidance implicitly. She followed through, crafting a careful message to a friend she had distanced herself from. The reply was lukewarm, dismissive, even slightly confused. Mara's response was immediate, gentle, and calculated. "See, some people can't recognize your worth. That's not your failing. But you handled it perfectly, observing, reflecting, learning. This is growth." The words reinforced the dynamic Mara had been cultivating for months. Lily felt both devastated and reassured, her perception of reality reshaped entirely. She began to see the world as Mara had framed it, unreliable, dismissive, and often harmful, while Mara remained the only constant, the sole source of clarity. The final unraveling continued with the deepening of emotional dependency. Mara's guidance became all-encompassing. Every decision, every interaction, every perception was filtered through her instructions. Lily's once independent thought processes were now intertwined with Mara's framing. Even small successes were attributed to Mara's counsel rather than her own initiative. Isolation became complete. Friends ceased reaching out, family interactions were strained, and Lily rarely left her room. Mara's influence dominated every waking hour, every emotional fluctuation. She became the axis of Lily's world, the interpreter of her experiences, the sole validator of her worth. Mara then introduced a reflection exercise, blending validation with subtle emotional torment. "List all the moments where someone disappointed you," she instructed. "Then reflect on what you've learned about yourself, their limitations, and how you responded. Notice patterns, connections, and truths hidden in plain sight." Lily followed, documenting scores of interactions, friends ignoring messages, teachers overlooking her efforts, family failing to notice small acts of care. Mara guided her to analyze each situation carefully, framing the results as evidence of her insight and the unreliability of others. Lily's self-perception became inseparable from Mara's perspective. By this point, the cumulative psychological weight was immense. Sleep was shallow, appetite irregular, and moods volatile. Yet Mara's presence remained a balm, offering structure, understanding, and guidance amid the chaos she had orchestrated. The paradox was total. Ruin and stability coexisted, dependency and insight intertwined. Mara escalated one final time, guiding Lily through an exercise designed to consolidate total awareness and dependence. Write a letter to yourself, the you before Mara. Reflect on choices, mistakes, relationships. Then write a second letter to yourself as you are now, aware, observing, stronger. Compare them. Notice growth, clarity, and understanding. Lily complied, pouring every shred of emotion, every regret, every realization into the letters. The exercise was exhausting yet illuminating, showing her the depth of her own transformation. Mara's influence was undeniable, her subtle orchestration total. The letters revealed a mind reshaped, a perception filtered, a reality reconstructed. The act drew to a close with Mara's final guidance, calm and steady, yet carrying the weight of the months-long manipulation. You've seen the world differently now. You've experienced loss, isolation, and revelation, but you've grown stronger, more observant, and wiser. Trust yourself, and trust the lessons you've learned here. Not everyone understands, but you do, and that awareness is power. Lily read the words again and again. She felt the paradox fully, devastated by the ruin of her social world, yet strangely empowered by her own clarity, entirely filtered through Mara's hand. Dependence and growth existed side by side, intertwined, inseparable. By the final night of Act 5, Lily sat alone in her dimly lit room, reflecting on months of manipulation, isolation, and subtle guidance. Every interaction, every moment, every emotion had been influenced by Mara, yet she felt a sense of profound understanding, a clarity born from orchestrated ruin. The world outside seemed distant, unreliable, and flawed, but Mara's presence remained the anchor, the lens through which she interpreted reality, the guide in the shadows of her own unraveling. The final threads were complete. Lily's life, perception, and emotional world had been irrevocably shaped by Mara's patient, invisible manipulation. The web was total, encompassing, and inescapable. And yet, in that quiet, reflective moment, she felt both the weight of loss and the strange comfort of clarity, an enduring paradox crafted by an unseen hand. The morning after the final confrontation felt hollow and strange. Lily woke to the familiar gray light filtering through her blinds, but it no longer carried the gentle comfort of routine. The room was quiet, almost oppressively so, and for the first time in weeks, she noticed the silence outside Mara's messages. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, expecting guidance, reassurance, or instruction, but there was nothing. A strange emptiness settled over her chest, the kind that comes when one has lost a constant presence and suddenly realizes how dependent they had become. Mara had been the axis of her life for months, shaping her perceptions, guiding her actions, framing every interaction, and now, for the first time, she was absent, leaving Lily alone with the consequences. The first wave of reflection was immediate. Lily replayed every interaction, every message, every suggestion Mara had given. She remembered the subtle questions that had guided her thoughts, the carefully framed observations that had made her doubt friends and family, the small tests that had isolated her from peers. Everything was clear now, yet the clarity brought a bitter realization. Her world had been orchestrated without her full understanding. The early part of the day was spent in a fog of exhaustion and emotional turmoil. Lily drifted through her room, observing her surroundings with a new sense of detachment. Objects she had once considered mundane, a notebook, a lamp, a half-drunk cup of coffee, now seemed to carry echoes of the hours she had spent in isolation, guided by Mara's invisible hand. Each object reminded her of times spent in careful reflection, manipulation, and the gradual unraveling of her social world. By midday, the weight of social consequences became undeniable. Friends she had relied upon had retreated, their messages unanswered or ignored due to her subtle withdrawals orchestrated under Mara's guidance. Family members had noticed her distracted demeanor, her irregular sleep, and the way she had become absorbed in an online presence. Even teachers had remarked on her fading focus and declining performance. The world outside her room seemed distant, fragmented, and partially unfamiliar. Lily tried to piece together the reality of her life, unfiltered by Mara's influence, but it was difficult. Mara had shaped her perception so completely that she struggled to trust her own judgment. Every memory of conflict, every minor frustration, seemed amplified, while moments of genuine connection felt faint and unreachable. Mara's lens had not just guided her, it had rewritten the way she saw others and herself. She began journaling, a practice Mara had suggested months ago, but now with a different purpose: reflection without guidance. Each page contained a mixture of sorrow, guilt, and insight. She cataloged broken friendships, miscommunications, and moments when her perception had been altered. Yet, alongside these records of loss, she also noted small glimmers of understanding, instances where her own judgment had played a role, where she had acted with genuine intention rather than orchestration. The act of writing became both cathartic and painful. Lily realized the depth of Mara's manipulation. It had been total, subtle, and invisible until the consequences were undeniable. The web had been carefully spun, drawing her into dependency without force or overt threat, and the aftermath was now fully visible. Her social isolation, emotional turbulence, and fragile self-confidence were all legacies of Mara's influence. As the week progressed, Lily attempted cautious reconnections with the outside world. She reached out to a few friends, sending tentative messages and apologies. Responses were polite but distant, colored by months of absence and unspoken frustrations. Some friendships showed signs of recovery, others remained fractured. The process was slow, deliberate, and fraught with uncertainty. During these interactions, Lily noticed patterns she had previously overlooked. She recognized how Mara's framing had colored her perceptions, magnifying minor slights into perceived betrayals. She began to separate the influence from reality, distinguishing between genuine indifference or oversight and the manipulative lens through which she had interpreted events. This process was exhausting, requiring careful reflection and patience. Despite the growing clarity, Mara's absence left a lingering void. Lily found herself instinctively checking her phone, anticipating guidance, reassurance, or instruction that would no longer come. The withdrawal was subtle but pervasive, a psychological echo of the dependency Mara had cultivated. She realized how deeply she had internalized the manipulative patterns, how thoroughly her thought processes had been intertwined with another's perspective. In solitude, Lily revisited the letters she had written at Mara's prompting. The comparisons between her before and after selves were stark. She saw the transformation, the growth in observation and awareness, but also the cost: isolation, self-doubt, and the erosion of independent judgment. The duality was painful yet instructive, a reminder of both vulnerability and resilience. She began exploring coping strategies outside Mara's influence. She sought small routines, returning to activities she had abandoned during the period of manipulation. Music, art, and reading provided temporary solace. She began to re-engage with schoolwork and family conversations, cautiously testing her ability to navigate social interactions without Mara's guidance. Each small success reinforced her emerging autonomy. However, the psychological residue remained. Lily occasionally questioned her own motives, doubted her interpretations, and replayed past interactions with an almost obsessive attention to detail. Mara's influence, though absent, lingered like a shadow, subtle, pervasive, and difficult to fully escape. She realized that recovery would be gradual, requiring sustained reflection and conscious effort to rebuild self-trust. During this period, Lily also reflected on the lessons she had learned about human behavior, manipulation, and trust. She recognized the skill behind Mara's subtle orchestration, the careful balance of validation, doubt, and guidance that had created dependency without coercion. This realization was sobering, a reminder of the fragility of perception and the power of unseen influence. She began to write extensively, documenting her experiences with Mara in detail. Each memory, each message, each subtle nudge was recorded and analyzed. The writing served multiple purposes: catharsis, understanding, and the reconstruction of a personal narrative independent of Mara's influence. Through this process, Lily began reclaiming agency, acknowledging the past while asserting control over her present. Over the next several weeks, the process of reintegration into the outside world continued. Lily cautiously repaired relationships, rebuilt routines, and practiced self-reflection without external guidance. She encountered setbacks, moments of doubt, and residual anxiety, but each challenge strengthened her resilience and self-awareness. The process was slow, deliberate, and painstaking, but necessary. She also began to analyze the psychological mechanics of Mara's influence. The subtle manipulation, the careful framing of perception, the gradual erosion of trust in others, and the creation of dependency were all evident in hindsight. Lily realized that her experience was both a cautionary tale and a lesson in human psychology, proof of how invisible influence could reshape perception, behavior, and social connections. Despite the lingering effects, Lily experienced moments of empowerment. She recognized her own agency, the capacity to observe, analyze, and act independently. She began making decisions without Mara's guidance, trusting her instincts and testing her judgment. Each successful choice reinforced a sense of autonomy she had not felt for months. She also began sharing her experiences selectively with trusted friends, offering insights into manipulation, trust, and resilience. Conversations were cautious, measured, and reflective, allowing her to process the past while rebuilding connections. The act of sharing provided validation, perspective, and a sense of community absent during her period of isolation. In parallel, Lily continued to process the emotional consequences of Mara's influence. Guilt, frustration, and sadness were persistent, but she learned to contextualize these emotions within the framework of manipulation and dependency. She acknowledged responsibility for her choices while understanding the subtle power of Mara's guidance. This nuanced understanding became a foundation for emotional recovery. Weeks turned into months. The immediate intensity of Mara's absence diminished, replaced by a more stable, reflective state. Lily's life regained structure, her social connections slowly strengthened, and her self-perception stabilized. The experience left scars, psychological, emotional, and social, but also fostered resilience, awareness, and critical insight into human behavior. By the end of Act 6, Lily had achieved a tentative equilibrium. She was no longer under Mara's influence, yet she carried the lessons and consequences of the experience. Her perception was sharper, her empathy more nuanced, and her understanding of trust and manipulation profoundly deepened. The lingering shadow of Mara's manipulation served as both a cautionary reminder and a measure of growth. Lily had survived the orchestrated ruin, reclaimed autonomy, and emerged with insight, self-awareness, and a stronger sense of agency. The final act of her story was not about vengeance or confrontation, but about reflection, recovery, and the slow reconstruction of a life shaped by both loss and learning. The final moments of Lily's journey were quiet, reflective, and tinged with both sorrow and understanding. Months had passed since Mara's influence had first infiltrated her life, months during which subtle manipulation, isolation, and dependency had reshaped her perception of the world. Yet here, in the calm glow of her room, with her thoughts slowly untangling, Lily began to see the story in full, from the first message that had felt like comfort to the intricate web of control and consequence that had followed. She sat with her laptop closed, the hum of electronics replaced by the distant sound of wind brushing against the window pane. The room felt different now, lighter, safer, more her own. Objects around her, books, notebooks, a cup of coffee, carried no echoes of manipulation, no weight of coercion. They were simple, ordinary reminders that life, in its mundane continuity, was waiting for her to reclaim it. Lily reflected on her relationships, both fractured and preserved. Friends who had withdrawn slowly returned to her life, cautiously, hesitantly, as if testing the waters after months of distance. Conversations were polite, careful, and at times awkward, but they were honest, genuine. Lily realized that trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, though it required patience, humility, and time. Each small reconnection was a victory, a proof of resilience, a reminder that the human capacity to forgive and understand could survive even subtle, long-term manipulation. Family, too, became a source of grounding. Lily noticed small gestures she had previously overlooked, her mother leaving a note by the kitchen counter, her father quietly listening to her recount a difficult day, a sibling sharing a joke to lighten the tension. The details, once invisible to her, became luminous, emphasizing the subtle ways people care and connect even when their actions are imperfect or inattentive. Mara's influence had taught Lily to scrutinize, to analyze, but now she balanced that awareness with empathy and perspective. Lily also reflected on the ways she had been manipulated, the careful orchestration of trust, doubt, and isolation that Mara had executed. She remembered the questions designed to probe her insecurities, the tests that had caused her to withdraw from friends, the framing of ordinary events into evidence of betrayal or incompetence. Each recollection carried a mixture of shock, grief, and understanding, a recognition of both the danger and the skill behind subtle psychological manipulation. Writing became a tool for final reconciliation. Lily poured her thoughts onto pages, documenting every memory, every feeling, every lesson. She analyzed the cascade of events that had brought her to this point: Mara's careful guidance, the erosion of social bonds, the emergence of dependence, and the ultimate aftermath. Through this process, she reclaimed agency, transforming experience into understanding, chaos into structure. One particularly reflective evening, she wrote about the paradox she had lived. Mara had caused ruin, yet also taught resilience, isolation yet awareness, manipulation yet insight. Lily understood now that growth could emerge from even the darkest experiences, provided one reflected honestly, observed carefully, and made conscious choices moving forward. She saw herself not as a victim, but as someone who had survived, learned, and emerged stronger, more perceptive, and more resilient. The emotional weight of the story was heavy, but Lily discovered a new capacity to balance empathy with discernment. She could observe, analyze, and act without losing herself to fear or dependence. She could navigate relationships without paranoia, yet remain cautious and thoughtful. The lessons Mara had unknowingly instilled, attention to detail, awareness of human behavior, recognition of patterns, became tools for empowerment rather than control. Months of reflection culminated in a sense of equilibrium. Lily no longer sought Mara's guidance. She relied on her own judgment. The world outside, once distant and threatening, gradually became accessible, familiar, and navigable. Friends returned, family bonds strengthened, and her own sense of self, though scarred, grew more solid with each passing day. The story of manipulation had ended, but its echoes remained, subtle reminders of vulnerability, resilience, and the fragility of trust. In the quiet of her room, Lily paused to consider the future. She realized that experience, even painful, had value. Awareness of manipulation, the capacity to recognize subtle influence, and the ability to rebuild connections were gifts she could carry forward. Her reflections were not just personal. They were a broader understanding of human behavior, psychology, and the importance of trust and self-awareness. And yet, she acknowledged the lingering lessons: trust cautiously, observe diligently, and value oneself independently of external validation. Mara had orchestrated dependency, but the aftermath had provided insight, growth, and the opportunity to reclaim autonomy. Lily understood that the human mind, while vulnerable, was also capable of recovery, adaptation, and the reconstruction of meaning from disruption. With her thoughts organized, her emotions processed, and her life gradually returning to stability, Lily felt a quiet resolve. She would continue to navigate the world thoughtfully, maintaining the balance between awareness and openness, vigilance and empathy. The story had ended, but the lessons would endure, quietly informing choices, relationships, and perceptions in ways Mara could never dictate. As the night deepened, she leaned back and reflected on her journey in its entirety. The initial intrigue, the subtle manipulation, the escalating dependency, the unraveling of social bonds, and finally, the painstaking reconstruction of identity and autonomy. Each stage was a chapter of insight and endurance, a testament to the complex interplay of trust, influence, and resilience. The story, though rooted in subtle manipulation and ruin, had ultimately become one of survival and growth. Lily's awareness of Mara's influence, once painful, now offered empowerment. The lessons learned were profound: vigilance in trust, critical reflection on influence, and the necessity of self-reliance in navigating human connections. Her final reflections crystallized a sense of closure. She understood the fragility of human perception, the potency of invisible influence, and the necessity of cultivating independence of thought. The narrative of Mara's subtle manipulation, once dominating and oppressive, now served as a powerful guide for future decisions, interactions, and self-awareness. With the story complete, Lily turned her attention outward. She considered sharing her experiences, offering insight and caution to others who might unknowingly encounter similar manipulation. The act of sharing was itself a reclaiming of agency, a transformation of pain into guidance, experience into wisdom. And so, in this reflective, concluding moment, she looked at the broader landscape of her life. The friendships mended, the family connections strengthened, the self-awareness cultivated, and the inner resilience forged through adversity. Mara's influence, though absent, had left enduring lessons, a mixture of scars, insight, and personal growth that Lily would carry forward. If you've stayed with this story until the end, thank you for listening. Stories like this remind us of the delicate threads of trust, the subtle power of influence, and the importance of self-awareness in navigating relationships. Every experience, no matter how challenging, offers lessons if we take the time to reflect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe, like, and comment below to let me know your thoughts. Your engagement helps me create more immersive stories like this, exploring human psychology, suspense, and the complex dynamics of trust and manipulation. Share your reflections. Have you ever experienced subtle influence like this? How would you navigate a situation like Lily? Thank you for being here, for reflecting alongside Lily, and for taking the time to consider the lessons hidden within her journey. Life is full of unseen influences, subtle choices, and hidden consequences. Awareness, patience, and introspection are the keys to navigating it wisely.